She texted, "Your car's fine, just a small dent." Then I saw the photo, wrapped around a pole. When I checked the GPS, it showed her at her ex's street, right before the crash. The insurance investigator's report confirmed what she'd been hiding. I've always been careful with my car. Not because it was expensive, it wasn't, but because I'd built it piece by piece over years. It was my project, my escape, my quiet little obsession. So when Mara texted me in the middle of a workday saying, "Your car's fine, just a small dent," I didn't panic at first. I just frowned, leaned back in my chair, and read it twice. It was the word fine that felt wrong. She was the kind of person who once cried over a coffee stain on a white dress. If there had been a real accident, she wouldn't be this calm. I replied asking what happened, and she said she bumped into a pole while turning into the grocery store parking lot. Said a dog ran out. She swerved, no big deal. I almost believed her until the photo came in. It wasn't a dent. The entire front end was crumpled like paper. The hood folded in, the bumper gone, airbags blown. My heart sank. The car looked like it had been wrapped around something solid. I called immediately, but she didn't pick up. Then she texted, "I'm fine, don't freak out. I'll handle everything." Something about that phrasing, "I'll handle everything," sent a quiet chill through me. By the time I got to the location she sent, the car was already gone. Just tire marks and broken glass near the curb. No police tape, no tow truck, nothing. I called the number of the towing company on the little paper tag she'd left on the kitchen counter. The guy who answered said, "Yeah, we picked it up about an hour ago. Cops were already there. We took it to Birchfield Auto." That's when my stomach tightened. Mara told me no one else was involved. No police. Just her. When I got home that night, she was on the couch wrapped in a blanket. She looked exhausted, like she'd been crying earlier, but was trying to act casual now. Said she didn't call because she didn't want me to leave work. Her version of the story kept shifting. Sometimes it was a dog. Sometimes the sun hit the windshield wrong. Sometimes she accidentally pressed the wrong pedal. I kept my tone calm. I asked if she'd already filed an insurance claim, and she nodded quickly. Too quickly. Said she'd talked to them, and that it would be fine. Later that night, when she went to bed early because of the headache, I sat at my desk and opened the car app on my laptop. Months ago, after a break-in at the apartment complex, I'd installed a GPS tracker in the car. It wasn't for spying, just for safety. I'd forgotten about it until now. The map loaded slowly, showing the final route before the crash. And that's when I froze. The last ping before impact wasn't at the grocery store. It was at a quiet cul-de-sac on Hawthorne Drive, 5 blocks away from where her ex, Derek, lived. She didn't even try to hide it with a detour. Straight line. Apartment to his street. Then 20 minutes parked. Then the crash. I stared at the timestamp. 2:47 p.m. The impact happened at 3:09. That meant she'd been there for over 20 minutes before the accident. When she said she went to get groceries, she was actually parked outside his house. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time she shifted beside me, I replayed those minutes in my head. Her sitting in my car outside another man's house, maybe laughing, maybe talking, maybe worse. The wreck almost felt symbolic. By morning, I decided not to confront her right away. If I was wrong, I needed proof. If I was right, I needed control. On my lunch break the next day, I called Birchfield Auto to check on the car. The mechanic sounded sympathetic, but said, "It's pretty bad, man. Front suspension's gone. Airbags deployed. Gonna be pricey." Then he said something odd. "Lucky no one got hurt. The cops said it was a hell of a hit." "The cops?" I asked. "Yeah." Officer O'Malley filled the report. "Should be on file." She was lucky, though. Passenger side took most of it. Passenger side. When I got off the phone, I stared at the wall. The mechanic didn't know he'd just dropped a bomb. Passenger side meant someone else had been there. That night, I tried to test her without letting on. I asked casually if she was alone when it happened. She nodded without hesitation, eyes steady, not even blinking. The ease of her lie almost impressed me. She said she unplugged the dashcam right before driving because it beeps too loud. That was a lie too. I knew that beep. It only went off when the car started moving. So when she fell asleep early again, I took the dashcam out of the glove compartment and plugged it into my laptop. The video loaded, a typical afternoon. Music playing, her humming, sunlight flickering through the windshield. Then, right before the impact, there was a pause. The car slowed, the engine idled. She parked somewhere quiet. And then a voice. A man's voice. It was faint but unmistakable. "You sure he won't notice?" Then the sound of the door shutting, a quick laugh, and the recording stopped. Someone had physically turned off the camera. I felt something strange in that moment. Not rage, not heartbreak, but clarity. Like a switch flipped, and every small inconsistency from the last few months rearranged into a clear picture. The late-night planning meetings. The sudden makeup in the car mirror before errands. The perfume I didn't recognize. The forgotten receipts in her coat pocket. All the puzzle pieces had been there. The crash just smashed the table and forced them together. I backed up the dashcam file to a flash drive and slid it under my desk mat. I knew if she found it, she'd delete everything. When she woke up the next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes, asked if I wanted coffee, even joked about me being madly in love with my car. I played along, smiled, ate breakfast, but every second of that conversation felt like theater. She didn't know I'd already seen through her lines. She didn't know I had proof of another man's voice inside my car. After breakfast, she mentioned needing to handle insurance follow-up and left the apartment in a hurry. I checked the car app again. No new GPS signals, since the car was still at the shop. But the pattern of lies was already forming like a trail of breadcrumbs. That evening, I decided to dig deeper. I called the police station pretending to be confirming a report for my records. The officer on duty told me the report would be available for pickup in a few days, but he could confirm the basics. Single vehicle, no pedestrians, driver uninjured. But then he said, "Your insurance rep already called for a copy, by the way." Name was Mara Connell. So she'd already tried to take over the claim before even telling me the full story. That night, while she was in the shower, I checked her purse. I knew it was low, but I had to know. Inside was the towing invoice, the same one the mechanic mentioned, but she'd scribbled a fake location on it. Instead of Hawthorne Drive, she wrote Jefferson Plaza. She'd actually gone so far as to falsify the address. I sat on the couch holding that paper, the sound of water running behind the door. The smell of her shampoo drifted through the air. Everything looked normal. Too normal. But my mind kept returning to that voice on the dashcam. You sure he won't notice? That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep beside her. I stayed in the living room, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something colder. Calculation. She'd lied in real time, layer after layer, with a straight face. I realized then that I didn't actually need to ask her anything. She'd already answered by trying so hard to bury the truth. The next morning, she acted confused when I didn't drive her to work. I told her the car shop called, that the insurance investigator wanted to speak with me personally. She froze for a second, then forced a smile. Oh, really? That's weird. I thought I already talked to them. Of course she had. When she left for work, I waited a few minutes, then called the investigator myself. The receptionist said they'd schedule a meeting to finalize the claim next week and that Mara had indeed already been in touch. She tried to handle everything in her name without me. By then, I wasn't even angry. I was curious. How far would she go? How much could a person twist before something snapped? I looked at the GPS log again, zoomed in on Hawthorne Drive. There, in the middle of the map, was the point where she stopped for 22 minutes before wrecking my car. I memorized the address. That's where her ex lived. That's where I'd go next. The morning after I memorized that address on Hawthorne Drive, I drove there before work. It was a quiet neighborhood, tree-lined, clean, the kind of place where everyone's grass looked identical. Derek's house stood near the corner, dark gray siding, 2 cars in the driveway. I parked a block away and just watched. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe her car, maybe her silhouette through a curtain. Nothing. Just a normal house, normal morning. I left before anyone saw me. But that street name stayed etched in my mind like a bruise. That evening, when Mara got home, she was dressed too neatly for a busy day at work. Hair curled, lipstick perfect, that faint floral perfume she used to wear only on our date nights. She looked happy, distracted, almost glowing. The contrast made my stomach twist. I kept my tone steady and said the investigator called to ask about the location of the crash. She froze mid-step, then said she'd already told them everything. When I asked where exactly it happened, she said Jefferson Plaza parking lot. I nodded and said nothing. I didn't mention the real location, Hawthorne Drive, or that I'd already confirmed it myself. 2 days later, I went to Birchfield Auto to check on the repairs in person. The mechanic, a big guy with grease-stained hands, led me to the car. Seeing it up close made my throat tighten. The front end was a complete mess. The dashboard was cracked. When I leaned inside to grab the dash papers, I noticed something in the glove compartment, a small, crumpled restaurant receipt. It was from the Rusted Anchor, a bar not far from Hawthorne Drive. The timestamp was 2:13 p.m. That was before the crash. 2 drinks. 2 entrees. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at the numbers. That night, I sat on the balcony pretending to scroll through my phone while she chatted beside me about some client mix-up at work. I asked casually if she'd gone to lunch anywhere that day of the accident. She said no, she'd been in a rush. I smiled and changed the subject. I have a friend named Joel who manages the surveillance system at a parking complex across from that same restaurant. We played poker together for years. I called him the next morning, told him I thought someone might have hit my car near that spot, and asked if he could check camera footage from the day of the crash. He called back that evening. Adrian, you're not gonna like this. He sent a short clip to my email. I opened it, and the world tilted for a second. There she was, Mara, in my car, pulling up outside the rusted anchor. She got out, smiled, and walked toward the entrance. A minute later, Derek came out and hugged her like it was the most natural thing in the world. They walked inside together, close, her hand brushing his arm. My body went cold. I must have watched that 30-second clip 10 times before I finally closed the laptop. That night, she came home humming. Said she was exhausted. I kept my voice even and asked about her day. She talked about a meeting, said one of her coworkers quit unexpectedly. She even joked that everything's chaos lately. I told her the car repairs would take another 2 weeks. She nodded, relieved, as if time itself was her safety net. The next day, I decided to go see Derek. He worked at an auto parts warehouse outside town. I walked in pretending to be a customer. He recognized me instantly, though he tried to act surprised. I told him I wanted to clear the air about Mara. At first, he played innocent, said they'd only talked a few times. Then he made a mistake. He laughed lightly and said, "Guess she told you about the crash, huh? Didn't expect she'd total your ride over something so stupid." I didn't show any emotion, but that sentence hit like a hammer. It meant he already knew about the accident before I did, which meant she'd called him first. I thanked him for his time, left, and sat in my car for a long while. My heart wasn't racing. It was just heavy, dense with disbelief. There was a difference between suspecting something and hearing confirmation slip casually from another man's mouth. When I got home, she was cooking. The smell of pasta sauce filled the air. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, fear, I couldn't tell. I sat down and said the insurance company had contacted me about finalizing the claim. She looked startled, said, "Oh, I thought that was already settled." I told her they needed a written statement about the crash site. She nodded too fast. Her hands trembled as she stirred the pot. Later, while cleaning the table, I found a small stack of printed forms by her purse. The top one was a copy of the claim report. She'd filled it out herself. The location she listed was Jefferson Plaza again. The date and time didn't match the GPS record. I took a photo of it when she went to throw something away. That weekend, the investigator called. His name was Mr. Holbrook, polite and methodical. He said he needed some clarification on the details before processing the claim. When I asked what kind of clarification, he hesitated, then said quietly, "Our data shows both front airbags deployed. That's usually a sign of 2 occupants." My breath caught. He continued, "We don't make assumptions, but in most single-driver collisions, only the driver's bag goes off. So we'll need both names listed on the incident report." I didn't answer immediately. He said he'd email me the documentation for signature and hung up. I sat there, motionless, listening to the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. The airbag detail, it was scientific proof that someone else had been there. That night, I said nothing to her. I watched her watch TV, perfectly at ease, her head resting against the cushion like nothing in the world was wrong. I wondered if she even remembered what it felt like to tell the truth. When she went to the kitchen, I opened her laptop. It wasn't password protected. In her email drafts folder was a message to Derek. It wasn't sent yet. The subject line read, "About the report." The body said, "They might ask questions. Don't say anything unless they contact you directly. I'll handle the insurance part." I stared at those words until my hands started trembling. I printed the email, folded it neatly, and slid it into the same envelope where I'd kept the GPS logs and the restaurant receipt. Then I made a copy of everything, the dashcam voice clip, the call record with the mechanic, and the investigator's voicemail. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them yet, but I knew one thing. The next time she lied to my face, I'd stop pretending to believe it. That night, she climbed into bed and asked if I was still mad about the car. I said I wasn't. She smiled softly, as if that fixed everything. But I was already thinking about the next move. Because now it wasn't about betrayal. It was about fraud. And the one thing I knew better than love was paperwork. Mr. Holbrook called again on Monday morning. His tone was calm, almost too professional, like someone who had to say strange things for a living. He said he wanted to meet in person to review inconsistencies. We met at the insurance branch office downtown. The room was small, cold, with a buzzing fluorescent light that made everything feel like a police interrogation. Holbrook opened a manila folder and spread out several printed sheets, the data logs from the car's onboard system. "Your car records more than just speed," he explained. "It notes seatbelt sensors, passenger weight detection, and airbag deployment timing. Look here. 2 front seat belts had registered tension at the time of impact. Both airbags deployed simultaneously." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "I assume you weren't the passenger?" I said no. He exhaled slowly, as if confirming what he already knew. "Then whoever was with her wasn't listed in the report. That could complicate the claim." "Complicate?" That was a delicate way to say fraud. Holbrook gave me his card and said to call if anything new came up. As I left the building, my reflection in the glass door looked like someone I didn't recognize. Calm, yes, but not myself anymore. When I got home, Mara was sitting at the dining table, pretending to work. Her laptop screen showed an event planning spreadsheet, but her phone kept lighting up beside her. She minimized the screen when I walked in. I told her about the meeting. She nodded, barely looking up. I mentioned the second seatbelt. Her eyes flickered for half a second. Then she laughed it off, said the car must have glitched from the impact. I didn't argue. I just nodded and let her think I'd bought it. That night, after she went to bed, I opened my laptop and created a folder labeled Insurance Evidence. Inside, I saved every screenshot, every call log, every scanned receipt. Then I added the dashcam audio, the one where that man's voice said, "You sure he won't notice?" I sat there listening to it over and over. The tone, the easy confidence, the way Mara giggled right before the recording cut. I realized I didn't even need to prove what happened. She already had. Over the next few days, Mara grew tense. She started hiding her phone under a pillow when she showered, deleting texts in real time, taking calls in the hallway. I played the part of the oblivious boyfriend. I even cooked dinner twice and made her think everything was normal. But I was watching every move. I checked our joint insurance portal and noticed she'd tried to edit the claim submission, changing the listed driver to herself only, then trying to close the case before the investigator meeting. I saved screenshots of every revision. I also saw that she'd attempted to request a fast payout under the emergency repair clause, the one that required both parties' signatures. The system flagged it for missing authorization. That was my opening. I visited Derek again that Friday, pretending to make peace. He was outside the warehouse during his lunch break, smoking near the fence. When he saw me, his first reaction was surprise, then wariness. I told him I wasn't there to fight. I just wanted clarity. I said the insurance company was investigating, and his name might come up if he'd been involved in the crash. He went pale. Wait, what? She said she was alone. That told me everything I needed to know. I told him calmly that the car's system recorded 2 passengers. He panicked, saying, "I wasn't even driving. Man, she wanted to try a different route, that's all." That line, "I wasn't even driving," sealed it. I had him. I pressed record on my phone while pretending to check a message. He kept talking, explaining how she'd come by to talk about old stuff, then insisted she was just distracted when it happened. He didn't know it, but that audio would become a cornerstone in what came next. When I got home, Mara was pacing the living room on the phone. She hung up fast when she saw me. Said it was her boss. I nodded. I knew that voice hadn't been her boss. I recognized Derek's tone even muffled through the speaker. She said she wanted to fix everything between us, that the stress had been too much. She even suggested a weekend getaway once the car situation was over. I agreed immediately, told her we could go anywhere she wanted, as soon as she finished the paperwork with the insurance. That's when she smiled again, convinced I was still in the dark. The next morning, while she was out meeting a client, I drove to a car electronics shop and bought a new dashcam model, smaller, built into the rearview mirror. It had Wi-Fi streaming directly to my phone. I installed it that evening, telling her the old dashcam had been fried from the crash. She didn't question it. A few days later, she asked to borrow my car again, claimed she had to meet the insurance rep for signature verification. I told her sure, take it. The moment she left the driveway, I opened the live stream on my phone. The camera view flickered to life. Dashboard, driver's seat, and then her. She was wearing the same perfume I'd smelled the day of the accident. 10 minutes later, she turned on a Hawthorne Drive. My hands tightened around the phone as the camera stabilized. She parked. Then, from the passenger side, Derek got in. He leaned over and kissed her. She laughed. For a moment, the world went silent, not from shock, but from finality. Every doubt evaporated. Every maybe died. It was all real. I didn't call her. Didn't text. I let her think everything was fine. She stayed out for 2 hours. When she came home, she carried takeout containers and acted cheerful, saying, "Finally met the insurance guy. We're good to go." She looked me straight in the eye while lying through her teeth. That night, I watched the entire dashcam feed on my laptop. I saved clips, timestamped them, backed them up to cloud storage. Then I made duplicates on an external drive. When I was done, I opened my email and attached everything: the GPS logs, the seatbelt data, Derek's recorded confession, the restaurant receipt, and the new dashcam footage, to a single draft addressed to Mr. Holbrook. I didn't hit send yet. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment. The next morning, Mara said she had a networking brunch. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. As soon as she left, I opened the email draft again and wrote one final line to the investigator. Please note, the driver submitted false information, and there's recorded proof of another passenger present during the incident. Consider this my formal cooperation. Then I pressed send. It felt like flipping a switch. That evening, Holbrook called. He didn't sound surprised, more like someone who had been waiting for confirmation. He thanked me, said the investigation would continue, and that I might be contacted by the fraud division. I thanked him back, then went out for a walk, my phone buzzing constantly in my pocket. Text after text from Mara. Hey, everything okay? I'm coming home soon. Why aren't you answering? I didn't reply. I already knew that the next few days were going to unravel her life in ways she couldn't even imagine. Because lies can hold for a while, until paperwork catches up, and that was my specialty. Mara came home that night looking almost weightless, smiling in a way she hadn't in weeks. She talked about getting closure, about how this insurance thing was finally behind us. I watched her take off her heels, pour herself a glass of wine, and laugh at something on her phone. It was like watching an actor rehearse a scene I'd already seen the ending of. The next morning, the silence in the apartment felt wrong. She slept late, the kind of heavy sleep that comes from emotional exhaustion or guilt. I sat at the table, staring at my laptop, the email to Holbrook already sent. The evidence was out of my hands. By noon, her phone started buzzing on the counter. The caller ID flashed a number she didn't recognize, the insurance company's main line. She ignored it twice, then picked up on the third call. I couldn't hear both sides, only fragments. Her voice, sharp and defensive, asking what discrepancy they meant, saying she didn't understand. Then silence, followed by the sound of her pacing. When she hung up, she looked pale. She asked me if I'd said anything to the investigator. I told her he'd asked for clarification, nothing more. She studied my face, searching for something, but I didn't give her anything to find. That afternoon, she got an email. I saw the preview flash across her screen while she was in the shower, subject line. Claim review. Fraudulent misrepresentation inquiry. She spent the rest of the evening on her phone, calling people in frantic whispers, mostly Derek. From her tone, I could tell he wasn't answering anymore. Whatever he'd said before, he wasn't saying it now. Maybe the investigator reached him too. Maybe someone told him the evidence existed. By the next day, her calm had turned to desperation. She started talking about moving the claim to her own name, about hiring a lawyer, about how unfair the system was. I just listened, pretending to be neutral. Inside, I was waiting for the moment when everything caught up. 3 days later, it did. Holbrook called me again, his tone steady, professional, but with a hint of restrained satisfaction. He said the evidence I'd provided had been verified, the dashcam footage, the seatbelt logs, the restaurant timestamp. He said they were filing an official report for insurance fraud. The company was freezing the claim, and Mara's name was being flagged for falsified documentation. He didn't ask for more. He just thanked me for the cooperation. When I hung up, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks lifted just enough for me to breathe properly again. Mara came home that evening, face tight and drained. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She just stood by the kitchen counter and asked if I'd sent them something. I told her yes. She went still, completely silent for a long time. Then she asked why. I didn't give her an explanation. I simply walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and placed the investigator's printed report in front of her. The section that confirmed 2 seatbelts in use. The section that detailed the GPS trail to Hawthorne Drive. She didn't touch the paper. She just stared at it until her hands started shaking. She said she never meant for it to go that far. Said she'd panicked after the accident. Claimed she only talked to Derek. Every line came out rehearsed, too measured to be real. I'd heard enough lies to know when someone was building another one. When she finally stopped talking, I told her she should pack her things before the investigators contacted her directly. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She packed quietly for the next hour. No shouting, no scene, just the slow scraping of hangers and the dull sound of drawers closing. She left the apartment around midnight. I didn't watch her go. The silence that followed was deep and unfamiliar, but it wasn't empty. It was clean. Over the next week, I got a few updates from Holbrook. The fraud division had opened a formal investigation into her insurance filings. She'd been caught submitting an additional claim in her own name, trying to change the story again. They traced the mismatched location data, the false receipts, the edited documents. Holbrook said she'd likely face fines, maybe even a suspended license. He sounded almost apologetic, but I could tell he didn't think she deserved sympathy. He also mentioned something unexpected. Derek had come forward voluntarily, trying to take the blame for the crash. He told investigators that he had been the driver, but the timestamps didn't line up. The restaurant footage, the GPS log, and the airbag sensor data proved otherwise. He tried to protect her, but the evidence refused to bend. In the end, Both of them were implicated, she for lying, he for attempting to obstruct the report. When the company closed the case, they denied her coverage and canceled her policy. I received a letter confirming the vehicle's transfer back to me as the sole insured party. The repair costs were higher than expected, but at least I didn't owe them in her name. I sold the car the following month. Watching it drive away on someone else's tow truck felt strange, like watching the last physical piece of that entire chapter disappear. With the money, I bought something smaller and simpler. A motorcycle. The same kind she used to call irresponsible. The kind she said didn't suit me. I named it Closure, not as a joke, but as a reminder that I could rebuild from wreckage. Weeks passed before I heard anything else. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived from the insurance office with the case summary. It listed everything, dates, statements, and the disciplinary actions taken. I read it once, then folded it neatly and put it away. Later that afternoon, I got a voicemail from Holbrook himself. He said the case was officially resolved. Mara's license had been suspended for falsifying statements. She'd been fined heavily, and her name had been added to a federal fraud database. He paused for a moment before saying something off-record, that Derek had admitted she'd tried to make him take the legal hit initially. She wanted him to claim he'd been driving when the crash happened, while she stayed quiet. When the evidence came out, he realized she'd planned to let him take the fall entirely if the investigation escalated. That was the part that surprised me the least. She'd been consistent all along, selfish, cunning, and scared of accountability. After that, life went quiet. I moved to a smaller apartment closer to work, somewhere with no shared walls and no leftover traces of her. I stopped checking my phone for updates, stopped replaying old footage, stopped wondering what might have happened if I'd confronted her earlier. One evening, I rode the motorcycle down to the pier at sunset. The wind was sharp, the sky orange over the water, and for the first time in months, my head felt clear. I realized that what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how easy it had been for her to lie, how naturally deceit rolled off her tongue while pretending to care. But the truth has its own quiet rhythm. It doesn't shout. It just waits. And eventually, it finds a way to surface, in data logs, in receipts, in reports signed by people like Holbrook. I didn't need revenge anymore. She'd written her own ending when she unplugged that dash cam. All I did was let the world see what was already there. A few months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Mara had lost her job. Her company dropped her after learning about the fraud case. She was working part-time at a boutique, renting a small place across town. Derek was gone. Apparently, he'd left after losing his own job over the same scandal. The story might have ended there for her. For me, it ended on a road outside the city, engine humming, the wind erasing everything I didn't need to remember. No texts, no excuses, no more lies, just movement. I didn't look back.